Hey everyone, today's question is about tapering for an Ironman. I had an athlete just text me a question about switching her weekend workouts to, which is this weekend. She's 2 weeks out from her Ironman race and she was wondering if it would affect her taper. So I thought I would just briefly go through what a taper for an Ironman is. First off, how an athlete tapers is usually for an Ironman is usually 21 to 28 days out, and what is determined of when they start their taper is how they do in the build phase. So the most important part of any training plan when you're preparing for the race, let's just keep up with an Ironman distance, is what you do 8 to 12 weeks out before your 21 to 28 day taper is called the build phase, where you're doing Ironman specific volume and intensity. So it's probably the most strenuous part of your training plan, depending on who you are and depending on your experience. And what you do during that 8 to 12 week build phase will determine when you start your taper and what your taper looks like. So there is a general overall guideline to how to do an Ironman taper as far as reducing volume, 21 to 28 days out, by 50%, 25%, etc., leading up to race week. But that is so individualized. So I'm going to give you two examples. If an athlete is training 25 hours a week, then their first week of taper may be 20 hours a week. And then their second week of taper may be 15 hours. Their third week of taper is 10 hours, and then race. That's a little extreme, but for this example, I wanted to keep it simple. And then, but for an athlete that peaks at 20 hours a week, obviously their taper is not going to be, their first week of taper isn't going to be 20 hours. It's going to be more like 15 hours, and then 10 hours, and then 5 hours leading up to their race. Let me give you another extreme. If an athlete is peaking for an Ironman at 15 hours a week, then their first week of taper may be as low as 10 hours, and their second week of taper may be about 5 hours, and then their third week of taper leading up to the race may be like 3. So how much volume you do is very dependent on how much volume you're peaking at as well as intensity. Things that can affect a taper include not resting enough, doing too much volume, doing too much intensity. That you do want to keep some intensity up while you're reducing the volume, but again, it just depends on how much intensity you were doing before you started your taper, and you do want to still keep up some volume, but again, it depends on how much volume you were doing before you started your taper. So if your peak longest training ride and run, let's say, was 7 hours and your longest run was 3 hours, well, then that first weekend of taper, you're probably going to reduce it to maybe about 5 hours, and then your long run 2 hours. Now that 5 hours and 2 hours could be someone's peak week, but because you build up to 7 hours, it's not going to be it's just going to be different for you. So again, using that 7 hours as your long ride, 3 hours as your long run, that first week of taper is going to be about 5 hours and maybe 2 hours. That second week of taper is probably going to be about 3 hours and maybe 1 hour. And then that third week of taper is going to be reduced even more. Someone whose peak week is a 5-hour ride, 2-hour run is their peak week, well, then their first week of taper is going to be about a 3-ish hour ride and maybe a 90-minute run. So you don't just want to follow someone else's tapering plan. You want to be very in tune with the build phase, and you also want to be in tune with your hydration and nutrition during the taper. You are reducing training volume, so you may slightly reduce your nutrition intake. Usually, though, the first week or so, you're going to be keeping it high. You still want to intake the nutrition and hydration you need to help recover from the build phase of training. And then as your body kind of gets into that taper mode where it's not used to training as much, you do maybe slightly want to reduce your nutrition intake. But again, it really is just so dependent on your nutrition intake before. So these are just a few things to keep in mind, but there are exceptions to every rule. Follow your plan, not someone else's. Some people experience feeling a little bit sluggish, a little bit more fatigued during the taper, which is the irony of it all is you're reducing training volume. You should feel a little bit fresher, a little bit more energetic, but the opposite tends to happen. And I've had both things happen to me. I've been doing this long enough where I know what to expect, but if you do feel a little extra fatigue as you start that taper, that's normal. If you feel on fire, you're energetic, that's normal too. So I hate to use the word normal because it's so relative to the person, but everyone's a little bit different. Really, the best guidance is trust your plan, trust your coach, and do what they say. Let's see, things that affect taper. There's a lot of things out of your control that are going to affect your taper. How much sleep you get, how much eating, how much nutrition is under your control. But other factors out of your control that affect your taper is you may get a stupid injury. A lot of times what used to happen to me was all of a sudden I'd be so healthy, and then during my taper, I feel like my knee would hurt or my ankle would hurt or something would start to hurt. Is it a phantom pain or strain, or is it real? There's a lot of research out there, so you can Google that. But things out of your control, like the illness and the injury. So, you just kind of gotta roll with the punches, let it go. You can control your attitude, and that's really where it goes in the taper, is really focusing on training your mind. You're going through your race strategy, looking back at your training, seeing how far you've come, and getting excited about the race ahead. So taking that time to try to add more rest, try to do more things to get you ready to travel. Most people travel to an Ironman. And start reviewing the courses, keep reviewing your race plan, start to visualize. I think that helps a lot, is visualizing based on your training, based on what you've done. You should know at this point exactly what your pace is going to be, what you're going to eat, what you're going to drink, because you've practiced that in training. So now it's just putting that mental image of sensation of how you want to feel while you're swimming, how you want to feel biking, and how you want to feel running, and especially during those last, let's say 10 miles of the marathon. How are you going to feel going through what if scenarios during the race? What if your goggles get knocked off? What if you forget something? What if your nutrition that you had in a pocket blows off blows out of your pocket or blows off your bike? So it's just really starting to rehearse the what if something happens, so you're prepared in case it does happen. You have a plan A, plan B, plan C. The more prepared you are as you approach race day, the more mental confidence you're going to have. And if this is your first Ironman, you're not going to know how prepared you were until you cross the finish line. So just really enjoy the process, enjoy the moment, and really enjoy the taper. You put in so much hard work, time, and energy into your training plan, and now it's just kind of time to reap the rewards of the training, let your body recover, and enjoy the process. Make it a great day.